Blue Notes. All right, so we're going to do a follow-up to the earlier video. I don't know if you caught it live or saw it on YouTube or Twitter or IGTV or wherever else it may be out there. I want to do a follow-up as I've learned more information, and I had so much feedback from people who had more questions about that video and some of the things that I put in there. I wanted to address some of those things today. And obviously, if as we get more viewers live into the chat, I'm happy to address these questions live. That's the whole point of this format, rather than just producing YouTube videos, which isn't something I'm interested in doing. So anyway, let's get started with some of the questions that I've had up to this point regarding these loans. The first thing is that there's still some confusion right now about, the number one question I get is, am I a small business? Should I be applying for these loans? And of course, the answer to that question is very specific. It depends on your circumstances. But just to talk about SBA guidelines for what is a small business and who's eligible under these loan programs, to discuss that again, a general small business guideline is 500 or fewer employees to start. So that's kind of where the cutoff goes as you get larger. Although there are still exceptions to that, depending. So those guidelines can be found at sba.gov, sba.gov. But below that 500 mark, there are a lot of other specifics. So, for instance, to be a small business under these programs, and obviously that's what we're addressing here today, a lot of other questions that I get do I have to be incorporated? If so, do I have to be an LLC or an LLP, or an S corporation, a C corporation, sole proprietorship? What's the organizational structure I need to have? And the answer to that is these are designed for anyone who is self-employed, as well as those who are running small businesses and employing others. So if you're self-employed, even as a 1099 contractor, one answer I don't have yet is whether or not a W-2 contractor relationship. I think that basically if you're eligible for unemployment under a W-2 contractor arrangement, so your W-2 based contract arrangement is terminated. If you have recourse to unemployment under that, probably not eligible. But the baseline here is I would encourage you to stop worrying about whether you're eligible and to start applying. That's their job. That's the whole point of the application process. You're not being fraudulent by applying for one of these programs. That's up to them to vet out whether or not you qualify. However, I can tell you, no question about it, the language of the law itself specifically mentions independence, self-employed. So another big question that I get about the application process is, what if I don't have any employees? How do I apply for a payroll protection program loan to protect my payroll when my payroll is me? I don't have any employees. So do I count? The answer is yes. You still are an employee of yourself. So if you're self-employed, for instance, I'm an S corporation, and whether or not I do payroll, whether I take compensation as dividends or pay myself in shares of stock, whatever, none of that matters. What matters is that if you're a 1099 contractor, independent contractor, any form of organization, if you're a sole proprietor who's actually never incorporated or declared this in some way, there are some other things that'll have to be figured out later. But for now, none of this stops you from applying. So stop worrying about that. Start applying. Let's look at what we're talking about here. So to kind of review what we've talked about, there are two types of loans. The first one is an EIDL, or an economic injury disaster loan. That's a program that's been around previously, as I discussed in the last video. And let me bring that up so I can see it better on my screen. Okay, so this particular program applies to all kinds of disasters that cause economic injuries. In this case, it's one of the reasons it's important that politicians declare disasters, and then these existing programs have become available to us. So this is the one that you can apply to right now, as of today, Thursday, April 2nd. And this has been online this week. They had some initial problems with this, interestingly enough, when they first opened up the online application for the EIDL program, of course, the online website application was insecure and ended up exposing people's personal data. So as a person, my small business, I'm not a business consultant. My small business is information security consulting. So I thought that was somewhat ironic. Perhaps they could hire me. In any case, this particular disaster loan application process with the SBA is online and it is direct. Normally, it's very unusual. Normally, the Small Business Administration does not loan money directly to individuals. They back programs, which is what the Paycheck Protection Program is. In this case, these are actually direct loans, and this is not an either-or situation. You can apply for these programs both, and I encourage you to do so. This is the one that you can take advantage of right now, today. If you have not already filled out a form this week, and I don't know if we have anyone watching that has applied for this. They had a period of time where they took the application offline and sent forms out that you had to mail in, etc. But I can tell you it is back online, live as of this broadcast. You can go to the website, which is up here on your screen right there at sba.gov/disaster. I'll type that in the chat now if you guys want to open that. Again, we're kind of refreshing a little bit here as we wait for people to join us, or I should say, reviewing what we already have. So, okay, that's the website. That's the link that you can use, and that'll take you to a page. Let's see here if this works. That looks like this. And I know we're a little bit cut off here in the stream. Let me see if I can fix that. No, probably not. So in any case, that's just an example of the first page of the actual loan application. So I encourage you to do that if you have not done it already. Again, the big questions that we've had are about what business entity do I need to be? The most important thing is you need to be able to prove that you were in business in whatever business you're in as of or before February 20th or 22nd, I believe it is. Somewhere around that range. I don't have that in front of me right now. But if you were in business before around February 20th or so, then that's fine. If you're a sole proprietor, so that means you didn't have some kind of corporation and that you basically took your business's income and filed individually rather than through any kind of separate tax forms, you're still eligible. Again, if your income was 1099, you're still eligible. So unless that 1099 income was in the form of gambling winnings, I can tell you that. So that's the EIDL. That's one component of this. That's the easier one as far as application right now. It's the one that's a little bit easier to understand. Another question I've had is, hey, I completed the whole application and they never asked me, how much money I wanted. They asked me whether I wanted to qualify for the $10,000 up front or not, but that's it. And you are correct. So this is only the beginning of this program, and they do ask you whether you're interested in the $10,000 of upfront cash. The answer that you always want to use for that is yes, of course you want that $10,000 of upfront cash, and if you qualify for that, that's money that you never have to pay back. I repeat, you do not have to pay that money back. If they decide that you qualify for that $10,000 in stimulus cash, you do not have to repay that. So I've also had friends and people say, well, I don't really want to, I'm already in trouble. I don't want to get into debt. I understand that concept. However, this is not the time to be thinking that way. The whole point of this is not to get you into further debt. The whole point of this is to keep you alive and moving, paying employees and paying yourself so that you can survive through what is now going to be a prolonged, protracted economic issue. So I can't encourage you enough. I can only lead you to water. I can't make you take advantage of these things. Hey there, 52 Gold Top. Thanks. Good to see you out there in the chat. So, yeah, I highly encourage you, just go ahead and apply. And also make sure that you ask for that $10,000 up front. I can't come up with a reasonable reason why anyone wouldn't say that they wanted to do that. And I believe that, and this is opinion, that the $10,000 not having to be repaid, that's not opinion, that's fact. Beyond the $10,000, and these loans are, I believe, unsecured loans in the sense that you don't have to put up collateral or anything else, up to $200,000. From $200,000 to $10 million, which is the range of the loan program, then you do potentially have to provide some level of collateral, property, etc. So under the $200,000 mark, once the SBA representatives contact you in response, that's where basically you just self-certify all the information and go forward. So that's really the only updates I had on the EIDL loan scenario. We talked about that pretty well in the last broadcast / video about this topic. I want to move on today and really focus on the Paycheck Protection program. So is there anyone out there that has questions about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the EIDL, through the SBA? I know that I've had questions directly from people who have been filling out the application. So if you had questions about your application, if you had questions about how to answer that, please let me know. It's a very short application process. It's really about like 4 pages. Most of these things are quite obvious. There is a question in there about secular, faith-based entity stuff. If you're not a faith-based entity, ignore that. There's an important question that came up is COGS, or cost of goods sold. That's an accounting term that they ask you in the application about what your cost of goods sold is. If, like me, you're a straight service provider, meaning you're not, as part of your business, you're not selling tangible goods, the answer to the question of costs of goods sold, 0. Always 0, because regardless of my overhead, for instance, say I'm running $6,000 of overhead a month in various costs. That could be rent, utilities, equipment, capital equipment, other items that are not capital equipment. None of that is cost of goods sold unless I'm literally selling a product, and generally that means like a tangible product. So if you're in the service industry, as I am as a consultant, if you're out there, for instance, working as an Uber driver, for which you'll be eligible for this program as an independent contractor, your cost of goods sold under that formula from an accounting standards perspective is always going to be 0. So don't start adding up what your costs are. That's not what that means. That's literally about tangible goods that you sell. If you're a business out there that is fabricating frame kits for lowering your car, for instance, I've got some friends that do that. That is costs of goods sold. So in that case, you have to talk to your accountant about that. And that's the bottom line here. If you have questions about that cost of goods sold, beyond whether or not you're a straight service, at that point you need to talk to a financial professional, your accountant, whoever does your taxes, because that's really a tax-oriented sort of question. And to be clear, I'm an information security consultant, among other things. One thing I'm not is any kind of accountant. So, all right. I don't see any questions coming up in the chat about the EIDL program. So what I want to do is move on to what I really have new and more information on today, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, which you should see on screen there now. Yes. Okay. So the Paycheck Protection Program, and this one seems to be a lot more people have a lot more questions. I think in the last video we talked about, for instance, that the EIDL loans, those are at 3.75% unless you are a nonprofit, and I believe those are 2.75%. So the beauty of the Paycheck Protection Program is, number one, the interest rates on these as published on the SBA site right now, although technically I know in the legislation itself, they mentioned rates being as high as 4%. These loans have been put, here we go. Let me make sure you can get that on screen. So it says right here on the SBA site, this loan has a maturity of 2 years at an interest rate of 0.5%. So that's one of the big difference between the EIDL program and the Paycheck Protection Act. In this case, the EIDL is a 30-year 3.75% loan program. The PPP, or the Paycheck Protection Program, is a 2-year maturity and 0.5%. So there's a huge difference there in what that means. However, the big deal about this particular program, the PPP, is it is designed by Congress, designed as an aid package with forgiveness in mind. The chances of you having to pay this loan back at all are slim to none as long as you comply with the requirements. And that's what they want. The question in the chat there. Let me take a quick look here. 52 Goldtop says, would you recommend that a small business owner, independent contractor, apply for more than one of these loans, right? As well as that, right? Since we're unsure how much we qualify, fear being denied. So better to apply for both and turn down the one we don't want if we get approved for both. Sorry for the delay. Okay, no problem and great question. 52 Goldtop asks, is it better to apply for just one or both or one or the other? My advice to you, again, not as an accountant, speak to your financial professional first. My advice to you as someone who has read the details of this, understands it, and is personally involved as an applicant and a small business owner, my advice to you is apply for both. And if they come out with more, apply for those too. And even if you, the only reason I would not be applying for both of these loan programs right now, very simply, is because I was so rich that I didn't need, if I had enough working capital, I think I said this in the last video, if I had enough working capital to not have income for 18 months and not have it make a dent in my business or my personal income, in that case, I wouldn't bother with this. So unless you meet that criteria, and if you do, nice to meet you. How can we become business partners? Because you are a genius. You need to apply for these loans. That's why the government's putting them out there. If you're a person who's afraid to take advantage of these programs, maybe you shouldn't be in business for yourself. You should go be an employee and collect unemployment. Nothing wrong with that. But this is what being a business owner is about. You really have to look out for yourself, and that means applying for these programs. I'd love to hear it if people have any kind of arguments about why that's a bad idea. I'd love to hear about it in the chat. Please, we can have that discussion. So let me move forward about the PPP and what's interesting about this one. Again, the legislation itself and all the language that you can read on the SBA.gov website. If you want to read it yourself and not trust me, that's a great idea. I encourage you to do so. The details of this particular loan program are that it's designed to be forgiven. And I went into, as I was going through the Forbes article and in the last video, so if you haven't watched that, you can go back and watch that. I went into all the ways that this particular forgiveness plan works. So basically, the summary they have here is that forgiveness is based on the employer maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and maintaining salary levels. Forgiveness will be reduced if full-time headcount declines or if salaries and wages decrease. So I guess under that scenario, and we talked about this before, to qualify for forgiveness, first of all, you have to keep employees on payroll if you have them. So if you don't have employees on payroll, then you need to not fire yourself. Pretty easy to do that, am I right? I know I'm not firing myself, so not a problem. Also, you cannot, if you're paying yourself or your employees through regular payroll, which normally you would be, especially if you have employees, you have to be legally. In that case, you cannot reduce those wages over the long term. However, you can reduce those wages temporarily and then bring those wages back up to where they were. And the details of that are actually in the video that I did before. I don't have it in front of me. So, if you've already done that, that doesn't mean you're not qualified. It doesn't mean you won't be forgiven. If you get this loan, it allows you to keep your employees aboard and allows you to return maybe a reduced wage back to where it was at the start of this crisis a couple of weeks ago, you still qualify for forgiveness of this loan. If you're a person who's worried about being able to pay this back, I encourage you to take this loan, put it in your bank account, and pay it back. Either way, that way you've got the cash. It's in your account. At a 0.5% interest rate, I can't imagine why you wouldn't do that. They're basically, the government is giving you a rainy day fund if you don't have one. So now, what I wanted to talk about too in this Paycheck Protection Program, the biggest difference between this and the EIDL is that the EIDL is something you directly apply for with the Small Business Administration. The Paycheck Protection Program, that's really rare, by the way. The Small Business Administration, other than the EIDL program, does not loan directly. They, like a VA loan, as we've discussed before for a house, they back banks. They guarantee you to a bank so that a bank has an extremely reduced or zero risk in loaning you money. When a bank can loan you money at zero risk, knowing they're going to get paid by a government backing program, they're willing to loan you money. That's how we got into into the mortgage situation that we got into, that ended up with the whole real estate market bubble. So what I'm saying is they're making sure money here is very, very cheap, and the bank is guaranteed, has no risk, and any interest that they're charging you is interest that you still have to pay and the bank collects. So it's free profits for the banks. You can look at this program in a lot of ways actually as bailing out banks. However you feel about that, that may be true, but as long as it keeps your business afloat, I'm not going to say no to that opportunity at these rates. So the most important thing about this, and as I said, right now the EIDL, which is open to be applied for at sba.gov/disaster. That's in the chat right now, that link. You can apply for that right now. The PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, that is not open yet. You cannot apply for that yet. If someone has told you that they've applied for this, tell them to worry about who they've given that information to, because it hasn't rolled out yet. The official rollout for this program is tomorrow. That's why I wanted to do this broadcast today. So I've talked to my bank about this. I've done all the reading that can come from any of these actual sources, meaning the SBA itself. I'm not talking about reading some third-party news interpretation. So the fact of the matter is that 3/3/2020, starting tomorrow, this program goes live. Now, that does not mean that every bank will know what it's doing by tomorrow. But this is so important to the banks themselves surviving this particular crisis that they're going to be working hard at it. So my advice on the PPP is to call your bank and talk to them about it. Now, 52 Gold Top has another question. Okay, there is that weird PDF application for the PPP online. Yes, there's a sample, which we'll look at right now. Okay, there it is. So this is the Paycheck Protection Program application form. You can see it says it's watermark sample. This is to help you right now get an idea of exactly what information is going to be required for you to apply for this loan with your bank. So again, this couldn't get any easier. This form is literally 2 pages long. That's it. Okay, we've got 2 pages, and it's the same information that you entered on your SBA.gov information, essentially, except for they ask a couple of questions, obviously, about the purpose of the loan. So right here, we've got purpose of loan, payroll, rent/mortgage interest, utilities, other, explain. Those are the basic overhead things that I think most of us need to meet right now. That's what this is designed for. So if you're independent, you can still check off payroll. For instance, just to give you an example, I have not, in this past calendar year and in many calendar years, I generally do not pay myself through payroll. There's a lot of variation in that. I'm not recommending it as a process, but I'm just telling you that that's how I tend to book what I take out of my company. I take in the form of dividends, but that has to do with your corporate structure, and the frequency of how you pay yourself, things like that. The vast majority of people in S corporations, etc., are still taking some kind of majority of their funds in payroll. So regardless of the fact that I haven't taken payroll in the last 12 months, which is what they kind of want to see or hear about here, I can still check that. Again, this is an application. And these are pretty much self-certification as well. So as you scroll through these, and I will go ahead and post a link to this. Let me put this link in the chat for you. So this link also has a link to that that loan form that we're looking at right now. There we go. Okay. So yeah, and I got that from right here. So download a sample form. It's right here under loan details and forgiveness. So here's the application form. I'm not telling you to fill this out. I would recommend you don't. Your bank's going to basically encompass this inside of their general application form process. But this is what the SBA, who's guaranteeing these loans, is giving to the bank as an example of the information they need, which is to say, not a lot. Getting a whole big buzz over here that I cannot explain. Apologize for that. Let me try and, I don't know where that's coming from. Sudden buzzing. Okay. In any case, so this form is pretty standard and straightforward. They talk about the same kind of questions that were in the EIDL form, as far as, are you subject to indictment, criminal information, blah, 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 felonies, misdemeanor crimes, U.S. citizen, and then this is the self-certification portion. Okay, so the self-certification is saying that the business certifies that current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary, that the funds will be used to retain workers and maintain payroll or make mortgage payments, lease payments, utility payments. Understands that if they're used for unauthorized purposes, the federal government may pursue criminal fraud charges. So just make sure that in the accounting of your business, etc., that you can show that any funds that you get from these loans that you want to be forgiven, especially that you can show what those expenses were. And it's not like you have to show that flow, but you have to say, okay, I received this much money in loans, I paid out this much money in rent, utilities, all those overhead costs, payroll, etc. As long as those things match up, that's money's going to be forgiven. You're not going to have to pay it back. So simple as that. Now, how they determine the amounts that you get on both of these loans is not something I can answer. I don't think anyone can answer that. I know that there was a question on the EIDL application that asked what your annual income was last year. So, and I don't know if that's how they worded it, but they asked you for a number. So I'm assuming that they're going to take some multiple or some portion of that for the EIDL loan. For this one, I have no idea how they determine this, because there doesn't seem to be any area where, they should be asking you here, how many employees, what your payroll number is. There we go. Yeah, it is at the top. So there's average monthly payroll. All right, so there we go, 2.5%. So average monthly payroll times 2.5%. That's what they're looking to give you. So as far as that average monthly payroll, you can look back on the last year. It's over 12 months and average that out. If you've been paying yourself, you just need to figure out how to look at that payroll information. I would argue that it doesn't have to be just payroll. If you're a business owner who's taken a certain amount of dividends or a certain amount of other items. And the thing is, in my case, I pay myself very little in payroll because so many of these expenses are direct to the business, right? Rent, utilities. So in the end, that's what I'm a little concerned about here, because if they're talking about the purpose of the loan, and they're talking about payroll, but they're not asking you what those other costs are, so we're going to have to learn about this together. But at least we know that this is the basis of the form that the SBA is putting forward, and we know that the program starts officially tomorrow. All right, another question from the chat. Will the bank dictate what amount you qualify for, or is there a set standard, or do you request a certain amount? Right. Should we contact our bank as soon as tomorrow? Wait for the SBA to post an app online? Great questions. Never apologize. 52 Gold Top. That's what we're looking for here is interactivity. And they're all good questions. So, yeah, as far as dictating the amount that we qualify for, that's a mystery. We don't know. Like I said, interestingly enough, in the form, they're only asking about payroll, but technically to come up with a reasonable number to cover what this is supposed to be for and what you're certifying it to be for, they should be asking you what your rent, mortgage, interest, utilities, and other costs are. So I would consider, if it were me filling this out, since my payroll is not a big number, but my rent, utilities, and other monthly costs are, and I can prove those very easily, I'm going to write those out specifically, in the application. However, this is just a government form. I don't think this is even what the application, like the bank is either going to give you this to fill out in addition to their application, or they're going to take the information from their application and transit it straight on through this to the SBA. So until we see an actual bank application, and we won't see one of those until tomorrow at the earliest, we won't know what they're asking for. However, knowing that this is what the backing requirements are, anything else the bank is asking you is kind of nonsense. You know what I mean? And you can probably shop around. If there's some information that you don't like in that application, I would encourage you to say to the bank, well, maybe I should go somewhere else because the SBA doesn't require that. And that's the beauty of having this SBA sample application in your pocket. You can say, well, this is all the SBA is looking for, so you want to explain this to me? So, and you ask another good question, 52 Gold Top, which is, is the bank determining your eligibility here? Is the bank determining the amount that you get loaned? I think the answer to that, to a certain degree, is yes. However, you got to understand that the bank is essentially, and hopefully this is a bank that has some relationship with you. They're used to, they can look at your banking data over time. They know who you are financially, so it's not like you can kind of get around that, and you shouldn't be trying to, of course. But but they should be able to average out and see over time, like, okay, this is kind of where this person stands, and they can make those decisions internally. The amount, though, that's going to be guaranteed is also not the same. I mean, a bank can give you a loan for far more than this if they aren't concerned about, your credit or your ability to repay. Whereas they do know that the government is providing this much of a backing. So that's kind of like the safe. So for instance, like I bought a house with a VA loan when I was 22 years old. And at that time, the VA program only covered the first $100,000. Boy, have markets changed, right? So that meant that, really the bank had to take a chance on you for anything over $100,000. So if I bought a $150,000 house at the time, the mortgager knew that they were good for $100,000 if I defaulted, but the other 50 they were going to have to figure out. So really, in the end, you don't need to be, there's enough for you to be worried about in life right now, to be staying awake, laying in bed at night, worrying about. I encourage you not to worry about this, but just to apply. I'm trying to help you do your homework here, but I'm not trying to bring up 1,000 new questions for you to have, because those new questions aren't going to help you. All you need to know is, I'm trying to help you understand the information you need to go forward and apply, and how to apply. Again, don't deny yourself a loan. There's really no point in that. You know what I mean? So just go forward with the process, and make sure that you've got your records available for anything that you're asking for. So hopefully, I know I haven't heard anything back yet from my SBA EIDL loan application yet. Supposedly, they're going to be getting back to people. If I don't hear something, honestly, in the next, before Monday on that, then I'm going to be submitting another application to make sure that it got there. And starting tomorrow, to your other question about, should we call our bank as soon as tomorrow? Yes. Banks they're already selling these. I got a call from my bank, telling me that they're trying to offer me loans. So, yes, call your bank as soon as tomorrow. I wouldn't call before tomorrow, but you can call your bank right now if they're still open, depending on what coast you're on, and make a phone appointment to speak to, a small business representative. That's what I would do, because the race is on as soon as this, and we're all sitting home trying to figure out how to get the money out of this. So my point is, it's going to get competitive, and the sooner we get this money, the sooner we can keep our employees paid and move forward. So my advice is, yes, I'd start calling the bank as soon as they open tomorrow. That's my plan. That's where I'll be. Okay, so I think that's the majority of the new information. Is there anyone else in the chat that wants to ask any questions, do any kind of Q&A about this? Thank you so much, 52 Gold Top. I really appreciate the questions and the interaction there, buddy. I don't know how many more of these I'm going to do on this topic. I'm really not like a small business consultant. I just happen to be a consultant and a small business owner, and I'm trying to help people out. I want to get back to more entertaining subjects than this, but it was the only way I could think to really help in this time of desperate need. So I'm hoping this is helpful. And we'll get this session broken down and recorded to YouTube so that you can share it with your friends and other business owners as needed if you think it's helpful, and kind of go from there. In the meantime, any more questions? Okay, looks like we're running at about a 30 on average. These are about 30 minutes, a little extra with the good questions today. So I want to thank all of you for showing up here today. Again, there's a couple of links in the chat there. As far as the two kinds of loans, the information that you need for both of these is pretty similar. And you can always contact me. I'm on Twitter at Slim Polsky. So you can always DM me or send a message there. I'm also going to be posting informational links and things like that there. And obviously I'll be going live with less serious, intense topics and more entertainment. The goal here is we want to do interviews, talk to everyday people, instead of up there on the screen having those forms and legalese nonsense. I want to have another human being there, and maybe we can have some good discussions and tell stories and learn some things from each other. So hey, 52 Gold Top, thank you for doing this. Thank you for getting in here and asking questions. I really appreciate that. And you're all welcome to do that at any time. So I'm going to give another 30 seconds or so if anyone has any more questions. Great. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate you being here for this. I hope this is somewhat helpful. So, all right. For now, I'm going to actually, I think I'm going to end the stream so it's easier for me to grab the content and put it up in other places so people can do a replay. And then we'll be back online with my regularly scheduled music kind of playlist in the background, and I'll be making announcements on Twitter and other platforms about when we're ready to go live next. I'd really love to do the next broadcast with a live interview subject. So if you can follow me here, if you're watching the broadcast on Twitch, this is where I'm going to be. We're probably going to be setting like 1 p.m. Pacific as my regular start time on a daily basis, and we'll have guests and kind of discussions about lots of things. So in the meantime, though, I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and share this information as you see fit. So thanks very much. Take care, and hopefully I'll catch you back here soon.
Spine.